I first wanted to ask about this reel that you had on like the archetype of a clown, and I want to ask like, why do you think this clown archetype resonates with us so much?
Oh man, I think I personally I became interested in this whole idea of the clown when it was like the start of the year. I was in a lot of situations where I feel like everything I was doing was just completely like an act. A lot of things just felt like putting on this happy, personable persona and entertaining people, and in order to like fit in with the world around us, even though inside you're like, what the fuck is going on with my life and the world? And there's a lot of anxieties and everything. And also, I mean, for me, like I work in advertising, and a big part of my job is to find interesting ways to sell things to people. And it felt like a very trivial sort of job given the whole state of the world. So that's when I started really resonating with the idea of the clown. And then as I was researching further into it, and also just talking with like my friends and scrolling the internet, I think it was a sentiment that not people shared, not necessarily to the same degree, some further, some less, but it's just the idea of being in public and feeling like we have to be one way and inside you're not. It's, yeah, in the state of the world.
Yeah, it's it feels like it's an internal thing. What I'm getting from that, it's like as humans we feel like on the outside we have to smile, and when we're actually like suffering inside, and so like all this like there's the like king's like jester. I think it used to be back in the courts where the jester was the only one who would like tell the truth, because with jokes you can get away with that sort of thing, and I feel like we probably conceal that a lot of the time inside us. And yeah, I guess I would ask Joel as well, like, why do we feel like as humans like we have to kind of put a smile on all the time?
Well, I was just writing here. I was like, well, what to me do I associate with this idea of a clown? And to me, it's fake happiness that is the purpose of making others happy while you're not feeling that way. And I think about, I mean, obviously it's not going to be the case with everybody who does that as a job. There'll be people that love it. There'll be people that can get happiness from it. But I think about the imagery, like I rewatched the first Joker film that came out in 2019 with Joaquin Phoenix. And that whole like first scene where he's putting his clown makeup on and he's like forcing this smile with his hands. It's just, there's something really quite dark about it. And you know that he's in this real pit of mental destruction. And then he's got to, go out and try and put on this happy show for others. So there's a superficial and fake and inauthentic element to it, which I think is why, to answer your question, Jacob, of why the archetype resonates, I feel like that's why, because a lot of us feel like we have to conceal, in a sense, how we're really feeling, because sometimes it's not socially desirable to go and be like, guys, I'm having a really shit time. Everything's shit right now. Like you can't really, you don't do that in social situations for whatever reason. So in a sense, we do have to put up that mask. And then for your question about, why do we feel like we have to do that? I think, well, it's really interesting. Like I was reflecting just for a second on humor as such a multifunctional pattern of human behavior, because it's like a real important aspect of play and how we establish our social relationships and how we have maybe a light approach to life rather than letting the pressures and the challenges weigh us down. But also it can be used as kind of a defense mechanism in the way that people laugh at their own lives as a coping mechanism for the fact they're not happy about it, or you can say things you don't really mean or that you do mean that are a bit, spiteful, but then just play it off as a joke. So it's complicated here. It's not as simple as just like pretending you're okay. I feel like we use humor and we use putting on this performance in a lot of ways in our life that people maybe don't realize at face value.
Yeah, also like none of us really know what we're doing. Like, no one knows what we're doing. So we're kind of, that's where the internal thing comes from, of kind of laughing through life and guessing. It's this massive, life is this massive folly, and so your point on concealment's interesting. It makes you think. It's like even when someone asks, like, how are you? And if you're really not good, you'll conceal that and you'll just say, I'm fine. And it's, yeah, how much are we concealing? A lot, I think.
Well, I think it's a matter of how comfortable you feel in that situation. There are some, it's just like someone you've met on a train and they ask you how you're doing or whatever. There's just not the time and space, to be honest. But the worry for me then is we're moving into a world where people have less and less others in their life that they can actually answer the question of how are you honestly with. That's what I'm worried about. There is an element of, yes, we all have to go out into society and function and be a bit of a cog in the social world and just get on with it and say we're fine and move on. But that's only dangerous if then when you go home or when you pick up the phone, you don't have somebody that you can actually answer that question honestly to. Because if it stays in you for so long, it's a poison that will just waste away at you.
Isabel, did you find any like solutions to your feeling like a clown?
I mean, actually, what you're just saying, having people to be able to talk to, that I think is the solution. Truly, around when I made that reel, I think I was quite unhappy or quite like internally suffering, I suppose. But then, and my solution initially was to think my way out of it and read and be like, oh my God, so people in the past must have thought about this. What were their solutions? Didn't get me anywhere. I feel like I just had more and more thoughts. But then my friend dragged me out to the closing party of a restaurant that's near me. And I think that was like my first interaction with a bunch of random people and like strangers and friends in a while that I truly enjoyed. And I remember just having this moment of like, it sounds a bit silly to say, but it felt like an existential moment when I was like, right, this is what actually you're supposed to do. Like, this is what actually we're designed to do, like, as humans, talk to people, be social, connect with people. And since then, I've kind of made a point to try and apply all these, like, I don't know, philosophical, psychological principles that I read about or am interested in into my real world and my real life and create these spaces, like host events, bring people together. It feels so like simple and almost too simple to be the solution, but it has significantly increased my personal happiness, at least.
Well, you said you try and change some psychological things that's increase your happiness. What are those psychological things?
Oh, quite literally talking to people.
Right. Like, we can be clowns together.
Yeah, I mean, it's just as you were saying, right? Like, when you're putting on a show for so many different people that you have to put on the show for to be socially acceptable, whether it's work or school or anything, you need to have these spaces to feel safe and speak truly candidly, whether it's in happiness or sadness. But then it takes a lot of work to get to like the point of having relationships with more than one person that you can be this candid with, and also to have even spaces where you can feel comfortable talking like this. Like, I live in Singapore. It's a big, it's a very like crowded metropolis kind of city. A lot of people will be living with their parents until quite late and like not even have spaces to hang out together and have, like hang out together and do nothing together without the feeling of like people overwatching them or feeling observed and perceived. And yeah, I've
got some thoughts on this that have been linking to things I've been reading, and then it sort of ends with a question for both of you. But it feels as if, and I wonder if you two would agree with me on this, that as a human being, you kind of have your internal self, and then you have your persona that you play out in the world. And something that causes us a lot of anxiety and that maybe causes us to feel like a clown in many ways is when there's a difference between those two entities, when there's a kind of script inside you of who you want to be and how you want to live your life, and then there's who you are presenting yourself as in the world. And a line from the book I've been reading at the moment by a Jungian analyst, he said that what the ego does, which is like your conscious you, is it tries to simultaneously keep your soul and the world happy at the same time. And he said when those two things are different, so like when your soul, like your internal narrative is different to the world and how you present yourself to the world, that means the ego can't do that. It can't keep those two entities happy at the same time. And that's when he feels that kind of level of anxiety. So do you think, I guess my question is, do you think there's some truth in that idea that we have who we are really, and we have a small percentage of that we can present out to the world. And when there's that lack of congruence, I guess, between those two things, and that happens because we can't share who we think we really are with the people around us, that's when we feel we're being superficial, being inauthentic. And then I think your solution is right then, because the more you can share your authentic self to the world, the more congruence there is between those two ideas, the less ego anxiety there is, because you feel like you're manifesting who you actually are in the world with people that care about you and love you for that. So what do you guys think about that as an idea?
Do you want to go first, Isabel?
Sure. I mean, thank you for putting a lot of thoughts I've been having in a much more coherent way. I do agree a lot with that. And I think actually now with online, we have like, it adds a layer of complexity because we have our inner self, our true self, the self we present to people in the real world, and then the self we present online. And it depends on how social media heavy you are. I am constantly online, both in my like job and in my general online presence. The layers of not feeling congruent, and I notice this a lot with people in the same industry as me, or just, you know, social media kids, feeling this disconnect. So yeah,
I like what you said there, Joel. I found recently the word persona actually like translates, I think it's from Greek, and it's like, I think it means like mask, like properly, and it's used in the context of like plays and stuff. Yeah. And when you said how James Hollis said about the world and what was it, the ego can't please the world and the self.
I think the quote is like, the ego spends its time running around trying to keep both the soul and the world happy, which is like an impossible task.
Yeah. Can you both please the soul and the world? Well, if you please the world, then on the outside everyone else is happy, but you're not. And if you keep the soul happy, then maybe you're happy, but then you're a bit weird to everyone. You're maybe, I feel like people might not like the extent of the authenticity or not giving a fuck and kind of being different. So if you can't keep the world and the self both happy, if you can't keep the world and the soul both happy, then the solution then would be probably to prioritize the soul.
Well, I can expand this a little bit more with what I can remember from like the early chapters of that book. But he basically says that when we're born, we're thrust into this world of complexity as this little organism that didn't choose to be here, doesn't really know what's going on, doesn't know who they are, how they got here. They just know that they've got this sort of hopefully loving guardian that allows them to keep surviving, and we're kind of drowning in all that confusion and complexity, and we're struck with consciousness, and we have a physiological organism that requires things, and there's just so much existential stress on us when we come into the world, and that overwhelms us, and we can feel abandoned, and we can feel lost in a sense. And what this author argues is what we have to do is attach onto a script about what's going on. Now, whether that script is true and whether it's functional for us doesn't matter. He said what it needs is we need an antidote to that overwhelm. And the script, he said, is just answers to big questions like, who am I? What's going on? Why am I here? And that can be, your name, where you're from in the world, who your parents are, the things you like to do, what school you go to, who your friends are, right? We pick up this script that is developed as we go on through life. But he says the problem that a lot of people face that leads to a lot of mental health crisis and spiritual crisis and midlife crisis, which is a term we all use, is when the script no longer serves us, and we need different answers to those big questions. And I think that's the predicament that so many people find themselves in, and that's when there's that difference between who you feel you are inside and who you present to the world happens. Because who you present to the world might be the same script you started when you were 14, but now you're 25. And you like completely different things, and you've got a completely different friend group, and you want this real you inside to break out and be the script you're living, but that process is uncomfortable. So we do the comfortable thing a lot of the time, which is continue on the same script, and that's where this inauthenticity feeling comes from.
So just to translate, existentially, we kind of have been given a script which I interpret as kind of the path that's designed for you if you don't take agency. And then we have maybe like the script of our soul, and this this script of the world, and the difference is why we feel lost. And so then, I guess a question that will come from that is, we're assuming that we want to live our own kind of, live a life on our terms with agency and live authentically with our script. What then do we do to the outside world? Because do we kind of neglect it and just kind of keep ourselves true? Like, because we don't want to constantly be pleasing it. Like we like, as Hollis said, like you can't please both the soul and the outside world. So if we can't please it, then what do we do? That's a question for Isabel as well.
Well, I'll just jump in and say what the book says, and I'm interested to hear what Isabel has to say. But he says that the most important thing is that you manifest what's within you that desires to be expressed, rather than just conforming to the script of the world. He said it's uncomfortable, but he said all like psychological and spiritual work is uncomfortable. It's like a snake shedding its skin. He uses analogies like that, or he uses like a butterfly breaking out of a cocoon, or a phoenix that dies in a big blaze but then is reborn out of the ashes. We are that we are that person. We can do that. We, in a way, that's why the phoenix kind of story and analogy resonates with us, because we do feel like we can die and be reborn in a kind of psychological and spiritual sense. So yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it might mean you have to change things about your life, but especially when you're young and you're not tied down with kids that you're responsible for, you can do that. It's just weird. You'll be in a liminal space for a while. You'll be in a position of transition when your life is just changing up a bit. But I think the sacrifice of what's within you that feels like it wants to be expressed is a more dangerous sacrifice than like sacrificing this persona you're playing in the world, because that's not you anyway.
I very much agree with this sentiment. I think I want to add another layer of complexity to it, and would love to hear your thoughts on it, which is this idea of the scripts that we're taught or we're given when we're young. I think another big thing that's happening in the world now, and I've seen a lot of people speak about this, is how the scripts that a lot of young people like Gen Zs and Gen Alphas have been given just on what their lives should be, like the general, you'll grow up and then you'll go to university and then you'll be able to get a job within your field and then you'll be able to get married, like meet someone, get married, have a kid, so on, has just failed us. Or it's like, for example, it's in major cities, it's basically an entire dream to be able to afford like your own property without the support of like your parents or a trust fund or something. So it's all these things that you were sort of promised is a strong word, but you expected from society, if you followed the rules, if you followed your path, just don't apply anymore. And then we have the whole AI and technology and climate change and all these things that feel like they're completely disrupting all the narratives that like our parents grew up with that completely worked for them. So
no, it's true, and I think that's a call to understanding that maybe listening to an internal intuition rather than the world to decide how you live your life is becoming more and more important, because we do live in a world where there's so many more influences, so many, there's advertisements and there's companies trying to sway you to use your finite time and attention on them, and everyone's kind of dancing in your face to try and capture your attention and stop you from focusing on the things that really matter, because maybe you don't know what really matters because you haven't sat there and reflected and gone, right, what actually do I care about? What actually do I want? Because, you don't have unlimited time to give to, this social media outlet, this company, this job, this person, this relationship. Like, we have a finite amount that we can give. And so it's weird that we live in a world where we have to kind of really, analyze things under a fine-tooth comb and separate the bullshit, because there is so much bullshit and noise, and actually be like, well, what can we do? What do we want to do? And I think that's much harder today maybe than it was for our parents' generation. I don't know, obviously, because we didn't live there, but it's right. I think your point's very right.
Yeah, I agree that this societal expectation, kind of American dream, like, it has been shoved down our throat a bit. It reminded me of something that you said, Joel, when you had a conversation with your dad, and that we actually don't want this security or stability. Like, I do think we actually we don't want to be a product of society's expectations. and so yeah, it reminds me of that, of like, all the kind of keeping up with the Joneses as well comes to mind, of like we gotta just be like a product of this idealized environment.
Well, when you're I want to say your more authentic spiritual self is less stable. I know I'm using woo-woo words there, but I'm sort of have lack of terms for this, right? But when let's say your truest self, whatever the hell that means, right? When that's less stable, you're so much more likely to look outside of yourself to construct yourself. You need a self for self-esteem and just to not be overwhelmed with like the existential complexity going on around us, right? You need that script of who I am and what I care about. And unless it's consolidated in you, the more you're going to look to like, oh, I bet if I had that Jesus car, I would feel better about myself. Or like if I could wear this brand of clothing, or like I did this job that earned this salary. That all I see when I see that kind of mentality is people who are looking outside of them to fill this hole in here. And that's becoming more and more prevalent, I guess, as there is all this kind of shit dancing in front of our face going, this will give you self-esteem, this will give you self-worth, this will give you momentary pleasure. And it's just like we have to understand that it's all this, it's illusion, it's an illusion around us, it's not real, guys. So I think that's very right. Interesting.
Yeah, it is so not real. Just because I am on the other side of that while thinking about this, like yesterday, literally, I was pitching to a skincare brand presenting to a skincare brand on how to frame their product in a way that is aspirational and all these things. And it's like when you're behind the scenes of the photo shoot, of the whole process of creating these ads that are just stealing our attention and our focus and our time, it's kind of depressing. And laughing it off as humor because we're clowns, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like in the marketing space as well. But I suppose you can't always have the choice, but you can kind of make marketing like art. Do you know what I mean? Like for me, like marketing is like more of an art of, and so there is kind of the fakeness about it. But I think there's a good way that you can go about it. This conversation also reminds me of when you said the other week, Joe, about how that there's this like financial, like, what was it? Financial.
The workshop you go to.
You came to your uni, and
yeah. I was going to bring that up actually. Yeah, I was thinking about it because basically I'm like a sports scholar at my uni, and we have to go to these workshops as part of our scholarship contract where they try and sort of give us life skills and stuff. And on the surface, that's great. You know what I mean? Like, it's important stuff, I guess. You need to know about finances and you need to know about anti-doping so you don't get, a bad drug test and have your career put in the bin. But it was just this whole financial well-being workshop. This geezer was just going on this narrative that all we're doing is working so we don't have to work anymore. He had this idea of like, do this so that when you're 57, then the government will give you this. I'm like, brother, that's like 30 years away. There's a rationality to what he was saying. But there was also an element when I'm like, all we're talking about is working so we don't need to work anymore. Surely that's not the right way of viewing things. Surely it's spend some time messing about so you find something you do actually like doing so that you're not thinking about not doing it anymore. Like, I don't know. I just feel like there's this weird narrative that we all adopt of like, yeah, we work for 40, 50 years so that for the last 20, we don't have to. That's a bad deal. I don't want to sign up for that. That sounds like a bad investment of my like finite life with this human being, man. Like the Joel Clifton experience, I don't want to spend it doing 50 years of something average to do 20 years of relaxing when I'm old and can't not physically functional. It's like, why not be a bit like different and maybe go against convention and find something when you're in your late 20s that you actually love doing, and then do that as long as you possibly can. That's just, to me, that makes sense more as a narrative. I guess it's more risky, and I guess people have pressure from their parents, or like they just believe that narrative, like you talked about, Isabel, of this kind of chain of life events that you should go down to be an appropriate human. Like we've adopted that as how it should be, but surely there are other ways. Like, there's no guidebook to life. You can write your own one. As long as you're not doing immoral things, as long as you're not harming other people, then surely it's our path to carve.
But Joe, if you add this percentage to your pension, then at 65 you wouldn't have to work. You wouldn't have to do anything when you're 65. You can be.
What am I going to do? Just sit in a chair and look at a wall? Like what? Like, do you know what I mean? Like you still want to be doing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the thing of I guess we're describing as doing a thing now, so you later can be in a better position. Like kind of this carrot on a stick. This. Yeah.
But I think, Jake, that comes from the philosophy that we have that not working is better than working. But that's only if your job doesn't resonate with you on a deep level. Like, I would love if we got to a point, Jacob, where we could do shit like this, whether it's, writing or speaking or whatever, and make a living out of it. And that's part of the reason we show up every week, is because we're like, we grind this for 10 to 12 years. Who knows what could happen, right? Then it wouldn't be like, I don't want to retire. I don't want this to be over. And that, I think, is, from a career perspective, what we should be aiming for. And yes, maybe we won't get it every time, but maybe we'll find somewhere where maybe 50% of our job is something that we love. Maybe there's 50% of admin and people we have to deal with and bosses that are a knobhead and all that kind of stuff. That's definitely real. But I don't know, it's just that there's just this philosophy that, like, you work so that you don't have to work. Man, that's just, I don't know, it just doesn't resonate with me, man.
Yeah. I think the way that guy that phrased it, working for retirement, it does really suck. I was having a conversation with one of my old bosses before, and he was like, the secret to happiness is having your career goals aligned with your personal goals. And while I think that sounds like a much better kind of goal to work towards, like, because you're going to go through shit in your career, like it's going to be admin and dealing with people, but if you're trying to get to a stage where the thing you're doing in the day is actually something that fulfills you. I mean, it's that, like, the saying is stupid, like, if you do something you love, you're never working a day in your life. But no, like, you should be able to enjoy your work. And like, even with, I shit on advertising a lot, but when it's good, it is really good. And it's like, sometimes you got to work through 10, superficial, like, social media campaigns in order to do one really cool experiential project or something. And it's a difficult point in your life when you're young, especially, to kind of prioritize long-term gain over, like, just trying to do what you want and what you love. But then they're not mutually exclusive either, but I think they're often presented as that to young people. It's either like, work and grind every day in your life. Oh,
don't worry, everybody's connecting some shit.
But yeah, I know, I think career fairs do not sell working very well, and working does suck very often, but it doesn't have to be that way, I hope.
Yeah. Well, I'm stealing this quote from an episode of the Modern Wisdom podcast I listened to ages ago, and I feel like he's quoting one of the first founders of Apple. I don't know if it was what's the main guy? Why is his name eluding me? That's annoying me.
Steve Jobs.
That's it. Thank you. Or who was the other guy? There was two of them, wasn't there? I feel like, I don't know. Anyway, one of those guys, right? And they said that when you work for something you love, it's not necessarily that you won't have to do hard work. That's a lie. But he said something along the lines of, the tools will feel lighter in your hands. This idea that, like, it'll still be hard, but it'll be easier to pick up that axe and chop at the tree. And it's like the hard work will feel meaningful because it resonates with you on some level. And I guess that's the more balanced way of thinking about it.
People who
and that aligns
live
to me
for
a
the
lot.
future never get there, because when they do get there, they're not there to kind of experience it. They're still thinking ahead. They're not. Their plans maturing. They're not there to enjoy it. What's it like? Because I'm interested. I'm interested in marketing. What's it like to work in marketing, Isabel? Like, yeah.
It is. It's a good question. I have a lot of mixed feelings about working in advertising. I think because in a sense, it is the industry of desire, like understanding what people want or deciding what people should want before they even know they want it themselves. And I think there's a lot of power in it when done well or when done for good. but the way in general, the direction in general that advertising has been going in over the last few years, especially, is what we're talking about earlier, like the attention economy taking out focus for profit, and just also with the world's like digital media and everything changing much faster than a lot of the people who are working in advertising, like the legacy people, are changing. There's just this disconnect between like what the advertisers are doing and what society or the culture or Gen Z / millennials with spending power are feeling. But I think there's a lot of potential in it as an industry, and I think you were saying something about like marketing doesn't necessarily have to just be all this like falsities and fakeness, and I completely agree. And I think brands are now, at least, I've been seeing more and more brands lean more into the like, we're not going to hide behind this facade of like, yes, if you use our product, you'll be like this real authentic person, like, and just really ripping off on full storytelling and fantasy and just creating like art rather than an ad.
What I
and
like
I think it's
about the
resonating
industry
a lot,
is
at least with me and the people
it comes a lot from a guy called Rory Sutherland, who one of the classic examples is he talks about how there's a lot of irrationality in the art of marketing, and how if you take an example like Red Bull that is really expensive, tastes horrible, and is really like small, that should not work. In theory, compared to the competitors, as an idea, that should not work. But it's so cleverly done with their use of sort of Formula One and their integrations in the kind of extreme sports market, and also the fact that all these things come together to make something like you would want something taste. Apparently, the market does want something tasting a little bit weird for it to give off this claimed benefit, and so I take that example and I go, well, there's a lot of potential here of things that humans didn't know that they want, that somehow resonates really deeply, and that's what I like about it, because you can take something very experimental and then launch it, and somehow like a company like Liquid Death comes about and is a fucking water in a can with a skull on it.
Well, there's an element where I think it's a pathway of exploring human nature. Like, why would people buy, like you said, that Red Bull analogy is so good, or example is so good, Jake, because it's like, it's expensive, you don't need it, it's bad for your health, it's not even that pleasurable drinking it, it's addictive, and yet, you know, well, that's maybe the reason we come back to it, is the caffeine thrill is what's addictive about it, and they just tell you that it gives you wings when it doesn't. And yet, you know, you show up, you know, I see so many people cracking open 500 milliliter Red Bulls at like a 3 p.m. I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like, that's killing your sleep quality. But yeah, it's really interesting. But then there's weird moral question. A moral question makes it sound extreme, but there's questions of like, is it then just the consumer's responsibility whether they buy the Red Bull or not? Or is it Red Bull's responsibility for putting out a product that's not good for that person's health, but brings in a big profit? Where does the responsibility lie? I think there is a way where you can market and advertise in a, I don't know, authentic and less persuasive, less exploitative way. But then that maybe wouldn't be as compelling for somebody who is more of a mindless consumer, or will just be kind of swayed by the narrative of an advertisement. So yeah, where are the lines there, I guess, for both of you, and especially you, Isabel, because you're in that world? Like, is the philosophy behind the company you work for and the stuff you do that it's just like, it is that consumer's responsibility to make that decision? Because I guess it is, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, this does tie back to actually what we're speaking about with the scripts we're given and the ways that we build our identity now. And you actually said it, like the narratives of these advertisements. Why Red Bull works is because it has a good narrative. And I think whether as a consumer you're conscious or not of it, if you bought Red Bull because you saw the advertisement and not because of like the functions that it's helping you overload on caffeine to stay awake or whatever, then you are buying in part into that narrative of Red Bull as that product that gives you like if a Red Bull is on the shelf next to whatever, a Monster, the person who buys a Red Bull is going to be a kind of different kind of person to the person who buys a Monster if they're thinking about it from like, oh, when was the last time I saw an ad for which one of these products? But in terms of like the morality, I suppose, of it, I think in general, there's so many layers to this. Like, on one hand, most products are quite ethically harmless. They're not actively, like, yes, creating the ads, you're just trying to take people's attention. But it's not actually it's not like encouraging crime, or it's not like a beauty product is generally not like a morally dubious product. But then, like some people, they won't work on a crypto account because they find that to just be gambling, and that's not something that you want to, they personally want to promote in the world. There will probably be somebody, actually, no, there is always somebody that is willing to work on it, that is willing to create it, because in the end, people need to make money. But it is kind of, I guess, inside the industry, it is up to you on where you want to draw the line. Like, whether you want to work for a company that their major accounts are like in the oil industry, or I don't know, sell cigarettes, or whatever your personal line of morality is, really.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess that's a good point. Nothing's encouraging us to really do harmful things. I just find it a bit odd when I'm driving about and I see like an advertisement on a bus stop for McDonald's that's like, a happy meal. It's not happy. It'll give you momentary pleasure, and then it's clogging your arteries. Do you know what I mean? But they're not going to tell you that.
Yeah.
They're not going to make an advert about clogging your arteries. If they did, I'd kind of respect it. But yeah, it's just interesting, isn't it?
Well, there's this really good Adam Smith quote where he says, it's not the responsibility of the butcher, the baker, or the other, I can't remember.
Candlestick maker.
Yeah, probably.
Classic nursery rhyme.
That you want your milk, bread, and
Candles.
and meat. Candles, yeah. And so I feel like it's what you said, Isabel, of it's, if you're not doing it, someone else will. And I think consumers have enough free will to be able to decide what they want. I mean, the external world will try and tell us what we want, but really it's up to consumers as their free will. And yeah, it's another example I can think of is like, well, where it gets tricky with that answer is when things are addictive, and then we start talking about, well, then you're really kind of like messing with them, and you're actually like, is that immoral when you're making someone neurologically crave your product? There's also and what you can do then as well is in economics they refer to addictive goods as inelastic, which means that the more you put the price up, the more money the company makes, and you can do that because it's addictive. But you can be a nice company, like I think companies shouldn't get necessarily a bad rep for exploitative marketing, because most companies I don't think do. Like, if you look at a company like Duolingo, they're like going crazy on social media. They're getting like loads of owls at like massive like costumes of owls, and then like you see them at like some Charlie XCX concert, like just dancing about, and they're just doing other like crazy shit with their own like characters, and they're selling like language education, and Gen Z love it. So like, I think in general marketing can be a good thing, and it's an interesting world. Like, how do you predict what someone wants next, in the next month, in the next couple months? That's where it gets like quite genius for me. And yeah,
I guess that's where the big moving decisions are made, isn't it? If you can predict not just what someone wants now, but what they'll want in 6 months' time, in a year's time, and what they maybe will use for the rest of their life, that's where the big money is in the world that you guys are in. Do you mind if I pivot slightly, Jacob, and switch the topic slightly? I wanted to ask Isabel about, you mentioned that you grew up in Australia, and then you made the decision to move like far away for your high school and like college, I guess, and stuff. Like, can you talk to me a little bit about that big life shift for you and that why you made that decision and how that sort of affected your life course and your mindset towards things, and just delve a little bit into that if you don't mind.
Yeah, no. So yeah, it was after high school. So I finished all in Australia we just call it like year 1 to year 12. So finished that. And when I think I only really made the decision or even thought about moving abroad in like my last year or two, like year and a half of high school. Didn't really think of it as an option, but then just met like one random person who she moved to the States for uni, and I was like, oh shit, that's something you can do. And so I started, I guess, realizing or thinking a lot more about how like big the world was. And because I think Australia is a very isolated country. I'm from Sydney as well, so it's quite like, you fly 5 hours from Sydney, you're still in Australia. Maybe you're in New Zealand if you fly the other direction, but I think it's very hard to access the rest of the world compared to like living in Asia or even living in the UK. I mean, so then when I realized I could leave, I started applying for universities outside of Australia, and I got this offer from a liberal arts college in Singapore. And it was like a really good scholarship. It was a really new university. I had never heard of the concept of liberal arts before then. But sounded like an amazing deal for someone who didn't entirely know what they wanted to do, to be able to like fuck around and find out for the first couple of years. And I think it was one of like the better decisions I've made in my life. I have met so many different kinds of people that I don't think I ever would have come across otherwise. And on like the positive side, I think it's been really good for expanding my worldview, of learning different things from different people and different cultures. And on the downside, I'm like, speaking of personal narratives and feeling a sense of, self and like place in the world, it's definitely been a continuous journey of figuring out like, okay, so where am I from? Who am I? Like, what am I doing with my life here? Because yes, I'm Australian, but I'm Chinese, but I've been living in Singapore for the last 8 years or so. But I definitely would not change it. And I like this nomadic kind of lifestyle. Like, sorry, I'm kind of rambling on a bit.
No, a ramble is what we wanted.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think it's just incredibly, like, I really have come to appreciate the university experience I had here in Singapore. I think speaking to you guys, like, I'm getting some, I don't know, fun memories of like the university days, because it really brought together a very massive, diverse group of people that I think my year had some, I don't know, like 100 different countries or something like that represented. And it's just realizing and understanding like people grew up completely different from you in ways that you can't even fathom. And your idea of normal is, like, yes, logically, you notice that your idea of normal is not the same as somebody else's idea of normal. But without actually, like, having those interactions, and especially being in a university setting when you don't have the pressures of life yet, so you have this space to just sit down and talk to people and, like, experience through them this entirely other side of the world. It's a really valuable experience. I think it's something ideally more people should have access to.
Well, there's a difference, isn't there, between knowing that these other areas of the world exist and that they do things differently to you, and then there's confronting it firsthand, feeling it, interacting with those people, letting them tell their story in their own way rather than just your idea of what their story might be. And I like that you sort of linked that back to what we were saying earlier, that you that's why I kind of asked that question, because it was like a decision that would drastically alter the script about how you thought about the world and yourself and what you wanted and what you were doing here. And I think that's I guess that's an important part of continuing to like evolve in life, I guess. I mean, that it makes sense that it's comfortable to stay where you are, but it's not an adventure. It's not meaningful. I think that's what life should be more. Is your life about being comfortable and staying where you are? I don't know. I don't think it is. That's not what my intuition tells me.
Yeah, stick with that intuition, because the older you get, the more you will seek comfort and stability over risk, and it's very easy to accidentally fall into that.
Yeah, I can relate with what you're saying a little bit because my uni, I think we're second in the country for most diversity behind one of the London ones. I go in Southampton, and it's very cool to have loads of people from everywhere. Like there's a guy who goes to my gym. He's from Zambia. I'm like, what the fuck? There's a guy from Zambia here. That's crazy. And really cool guy. And yeah, you by talking to those types of people, it allows you to understand different modes of living, and I'd much prefer that than kind of being in your own like tiny hometown that's like in your own kind of shell. And because yeah, there isn't, as Joel said, there isn't as much adventure from that. But some people like that, and some people that's cool for them. So yeah.
Jake, do you have any sort of major topics you wanted to move on to before we begin to sort of conclude and such?
The last one I kind of was interested in is when you did like a reel about it was like brain rot and absurdism. Yeah,
Yes.
so talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think last year especially was a big year for brain rot. It was probably one of the dictionary's word of the year or something. And I think the kind of, absurd, like, whack content really peaked around then. And, you know, being in advertising, part of my job is to keep up with trends. And I was like, shit, this has to be saying something more. And then, I don't know when, like, I think it was some meme or whatever that I just saw, like, a guy referencing the myth of Sisyphus. I think I studied it at some point in uni, like, very briefly, but, something like clicked in my mind, and then I reread it, and The Stranger, and I was like, this all makes sense. Basically, everything is tying back to the narratives, but what I was saying, or what we were discussing earlier about like what the scripts, I guess, that we're told the world should be, and the reality of like as you're growing up realizing it's completely not that way. That disconnects. That like we're experiencing now. When I was reading Camus, I was like, this is the same thing as what he was feeling, just updated for the 21st century. And so I don't know. Then like I know a lot of people who commented on the video pointed out that we had this during what happened already. It was just Dadaism, and I agree. Like the response, like in the modern era, to things not making sense has been to make things that also don't make sense. But yeah. I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. It's all the brain rot that's consuming my attention span, I guess.
You familiar with what brain rot is, John?
Well, sort of. Yeah, I guess. I do. Yeah. I mean, we've all been captured by it at times, even if we claim we're not. It's an intrinsic part of the modern like technological space that even though I try and separate myself from as much as possible, I still have an awareness of it. And it's part of that. It's part of what I said, I guess, about the sort of a lot of the bullshit and noise that dances in front of us in life. And it's a distraction that can be, humorous in the short term, but I mean, it's really not good for your brain. It's really not good for the amount of time and attention that you're using up on it. We live in a weird world. Like it's an interesting question I'll pose to both of you, but I'm interested to see now how the sort of generation younger than us, Jacob, how they are when they get into sort of teenagehood and early adulthood, when they've been so absorbed with this stuff from like the age of like 8 years old. It's like for me, it's come when I'm 18 and I'm kind of established more with what I believe about where I should put my attention and stuff. And I'm a weird kind of don that's done self-work at 18 years old as a male and stuff. But what's going to happen to the kids that are hit with this when their idea of the world and their idea of their self is still so malleable and open to change? What's that going to look like, and how are they going to think about their social relationships? How are they going to think about humor? How are they going to think about what's important in life? It's scary. It is, isn't it? When this is like we are filling our brains with this stuff that wasn't a thing 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So where do we think it's going to end up?
It's weird because it's like it's as a world we have this going on. It's not just like a specific area. Like this is a humanity like change, and everyone has it. So it's like, if you don't have it, like, how many kids in our school kind of weren't on social media and stuff? You'd get like a couple, and so it's basically everyone already. And I don't think it's gonna maybe stop unless maybe the whole generation decides to culturally. I think it has to change culturally in terms of brain rot. Like, if as a culture we want to consume other things, but it wouldn't, I don't think, just happen naturally.
That's why I also think, right, I think if there's one, well, there's many skills, I think, or meta skills that I think it'd be useful for people to think about, but one meta skill relevant to this conversation we're having is, if you remain, or if you maintain and work on the ability to pay attention to a single thing for an extended period of time, you are going to be an animal in about 20 years when no one can do that. Like, it's like, it'll be this prehistoric ability to, like, oh my god, you can sit and work for an hour and not think about anything else. It's like, you'll be a monster in your career, and you'll be more present in your relationships, and I think you'll have a greater level of peace, because your mind isn't just frazzled and darting between different sort of things trying to steal its attention. And I feel like that's something for us to think about, and for the people listening to think about. Like, if you can do that, that's maybe one of the clearest ways to me of maintaining your value in the work world and in your life as the world is moving forward in the way that it is. Can you be present now? Can you do the thing you're doing now without needing your brain to jump from here, there, and everywhere? I think that's going to be crucial.
Yeah, I am curious about what the future will look like. Like, the optimist in me thinks that the real, like, the kids right now, they have seen the harms of social media, and much earlier than people slightly more on, like, the early Gen Z / millennials. I feel like that's my generation, like, we kind of had hope and then got addicted and then realized it was actually really bad. So optimistically, people much younger will reject it entirely, reject it much more than, like, people my age are rejecting it, and go totally offline. Like, you see people having, like, dumb phones and, I don't know, I suppose, and, like, just not going on Instagram or, like, or TikTok. So that's the optimistic side of it. More realistically, we're fucked. But as you said, we don't have to be. Training focus, I think, is incredibly important. And I think, like, what you guys do here, like, having this podcast as this place for the two of you to just sit down and talk about, literally, it could be talking about anything, but you're not, like, on your phones, you're not being distracted by other things. Having this it's an informal, formal setting to do this, it's a really good way. I mean, we don't need more people to start podcasts, let's be real, but more people should start a podcast sort of thing, even just with their friends, and have that, like, focused time, because it is, yeah, as you said, you're going to be a monster in 20 years if you can still maintain this. That's something you have to keep working at.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's like, me and Jacob speak once a week for an hour and a bit on a podcast, and then maybe I'll call him at the weekend to just debrief the week slightly, half an hour call maybe. But even with that small volume of time compared to many other people I interact with in my life, he is one of my closest friends, because it's like every interaction we have basically goes to some level of depth. Like, I know how Jacob thinks, he knows how I think. It's not just this, like, clown oriented, like, superficial human interaction of, like, we go, I don't know, you have friends in life or acquaintances that you go and do things with that are functional, like your work colleagues or your classmates in high school or whatever. But then true friends are people that know you and who you are really inside, like, going back to that thing we initially first talked about, the difference between who you are really and who you present to the world. Jacob knows who I present to the world because he sees the things that I do in life, but he also knows that there's this little kid from a small town in Devon that's confused in the world and has to figure stuff out. And he also knows how nerdy and fascinated I am by different, like, psychological theories. And, you know, it's like, I think it's a beautiful practice. And it's great for focus too. And just, it's a form of connecting to another person. And when we have guests on, like, it's amazing. Me and Jacob were talking before you came on the call that, like, it's amazing that on a random Saturday morning we can chat to somebody who's half across the world that has similar interest to us, have a conversation. We've never met before, and yet we've just spoke for an hour about random shit. And that's just, I think it's good. Great.
I think not everyone's going to do this to the extent that we do it, but what I think they can do is find a time in their week to schedule an hour with someone to talk. I think people can do that, and I think that's the practical implication for the people listening.
Yeah, I'm all good to conclude if you are, Jake.
Yeah, Isabel, if people want to find out a bit more about you, where should they go?
Find me on Instagram. I'm at artificial.isabel, and that's mainly where I am, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you everyone for listening.